I'm not a vampire.
Seriously? I thought with the darkness and the vanishing, then what? Super strength?
No.
Can you fly?
In a plane.
Wait, you're not just some guy in a bat costume, are you?
When I was a kid, I used to think Batman had powers. And
What?
yeah, I guess that's what happens when your first ever superhero film is Spider-Man. You just start to think any superhero's name ends with man must have been bitten by whatever the first name implies. Like Spider-Man being bitten by a radioactive spider, so I thought maybe Batman was bitten by a radioactive bat. So in that logic, you could also say that maybe Iron Man was bitten by radioactive iron? I don't know, I was a dumb kid, I don't even know why I'm telling you this in the first place. But you can't really blame me for thinking Batman had superpowers at the age I was. Basically, every cartoon of Batman I ever saw, he was always capable of such incredible feats that it became hard to doubt he wasn't superpowered in some way. So I guess it's obvious I watched Brave and the Bold a lot. And also, yeah, the absolute dread that came with realizing Batman actually had no powers was massive, but it also made me adore the character even more in some way. A mere man capable of so much, able to exist in a world filled with superhumans and godlike beings, yet still makes his presence known. One whose villains can move from overly grounded to the most out-of-pocket ones, and it'll make sense because he's Batman. That idea is incredible and honestly awfully inspiring for a kid, and that has generally been the appeal of the character for so many years, as depicted in the comics, animations, and even in the games. But when the spotlight turns to the live-action rendition of the character, everything starts to feel flat. There is very little that makes him feel like Batman. It seems inherently difficult to bring Batman in all his glory to the big screen, and it all boils down to one thing: the overdependence on giving us a realistic Batman. The need to ground Batman in a world that's way too similar to ours. And I don't only think that this ruins Batman movies, I fear it will continue to be a Batman problem moving forward.
I am the Knight. I am Batman.
Batman is a character that just can't help but be loved. The idea of him is both interesting and very hilarious. On the interesting side of things, he's a man who had to deal with trauma at a very young age due to the failings of society. A society that breeds crime, especially in a city that can't do much about it. So he decided to be that driving force, to bring justice to the unjustified, by training himself beyond human capabilities, using his intellect to build technologies, and then donning the batsuit to fight crime. But on the more hilarious side of things, Batman is a kind of nonsensical. He's basically just a billionaire who chooses to wear a batsuit and beat the hell out of criminals or poor people, anyone you prefer. He could literally be anyone, a cop, a ninja, but he decides to be a bat. Why? Well, I don't know. And when you take a closer look, it becomes clear where each depiction of Batman tends to fall. The comics, animations, and the video games really tackle the interesting parts of Batman and use them to tell genuinely great stories. Meanwhile, the live-action depiction often lean towards the absurdity of Batman. Batman has existed for nearly a century and will most likely last another. All of this is because of how iconic he is, and because of this longevity, there have been so many attempts to bring the character to life. Many landed and many dropped the ball hard. But to understand how that led to the complete oversaturation of realism in Batman movies and why I think it ruins them, we need to take a bit of a history lesson. One of the most prominent and recognized Batman to ever hit the mainstream was Adam West's Batman in the 1960s. This version introduced fans to an extremely campy and goofy Batman, with its unserious tone and over-the-top nature where punches had sound effects, Batman fights sharks or runs around with a cartoon-looking bomb. I don't think anything can be more unserious than that. Not much was expected from this show, but it also made Batman seem like a character that couldn't be taken seriously. That's why in 1989, when Tim Burton took a spin at the character, it was truly something interesting. Tim Burton didn't just make a Batman movie, he made a movie where it felt believable that Batman should exist. It was more serious, but it didn't always take itself seriously. Some out-of-pocket things happened here and there, but it made sense because the world allowed it. The setting of Gotham was also done right, in my opinion. Gotham actually felt like Gotham. Dark, depressing, overly gritty. The aesthetics sold that look perfectly, even down to the outfits worn by the Gothamites, Gothamers, Gotham people. Is there a word for them? Gotham citizens? Yeah, I think that one works. They had this old-style mafia clothing that really sold the atmosphere of what Gotham is like. However, despite all that was achieved, things started to go downhill. Batman Returns, still by Tim Burton, leaned too dark into Batman, and when I say dark, I mean disgustingly so. The Penguin wasn't the mob boss we widely know him as. Instead, he was this mutated pig man that eats cats and talks like he's about to shit himself.
A cool drink.
And there was Catwoman too, which Catwoman. But for a kids movie, there was so much darkness in this film that it didn't just sit well with the audience. And we all know how Warner Bros. React when it comes to hiccups in their films. They panic and they make drastic changes. So in this process, they handed the project over to Joel Schumacher. So they tasked him with toning Batman down, making him less dark and adding a little bit of light to the character. That gave us Batman Forever, which wasn't extremely campy, but campy nonetheless. Everything felt jokified and it was off-putting, especially when compared to what came before. Still, it was way better than what came next, being Batman and Robin, which was a movie that was so unbelievably bad, it tainted the Batman name for years. It took Batman's absurdity to an unreasonable height, stripping the character of all forms of respect. And as usual, or better yet, reasonable, Warner Bros. Decided to hold off on live-action Batman for a while. Well, until 2005, where we had Batman Begins. Christopher Nolan stepped in to make a Batman that was different, one that took itself seriously and most importantly aimed to be realistic. Nolan has a very distinct flair when it comes to his movies. One of his most notable traits is his minimal use of CGI unless absolutely unavoidable. He tries to portray as much realism as possible, and that's what distinguishes him from many other directors. So with a mindset like that, it was inevitable his Batman would follow suit.
So my pitch was at the time, let's treat this with some sense of reality, more like not so much a comic book movie as an action film. Really the idea of an extraordinary character in an ordinary world.
Batman Begins is still praised today as one of the best Batman origin stories ever made. It delves deep into Bruce Wayne's psychology and the reason Batman exists. Never before had Batman's origin been handled with so much care, and after years of having Batman being like a literal joke, this felt genuinely refreshing. Nolan used realism to make Batman into a grounded crime thriller. His fighting style, his weapons, his suit, he doesn't even drive anything remotely close to a Batmobile but a freaking tank. He took it a step further to make sure that every single thing makes sense, that every single thing is explainable. But this grounded mentality eventually became excessive. There was so much emphasis on realism that Batman slowly stopped feeling like Batman. The idea of a man choosing to dress like a bat and fight criminals every night became even more ridiculous under strict realism. Villains were chopped down and reimagined to fit a grounded world. Ghul had no Lazarus Pit, he was just a master assassin who actually died, which completely goes against the comic counterpart. The Joker had no chemical bath, just face paint, though Heath Ledger's performance still carried the entire character. Bane arguably suffered the worst. In the comics, he's a brute empowered by Venom. In The Dark Knight Rises, he's just a man who punches really hard. This became the core problem of the Nolan trilogy. Everything had to be dark, serious, realistic, everything had to, make sense, and in doing so, Batman was stripped of so much potential. No superhuman villains, no Robin, no extraordinary feats, just a man in a batsuit solving crimes. When the Dark Knight trilogy ended, many of us hoped for a return to a more fantastical, more superficial Batman, and briefly we did get that Batman, played by Ben Affleck. All live-action Batman, Affleck's came close to almost being perfect. I haven't made a whole video about that, but Affleck's Batman existed in an extended universe filled with other superheroes, so it made sense for him to be more than just a man. He was stronger, smarter, and better equipped. Still, even here, realism crept in and Batman's core was neglected. His no-kill rule, one of the most debated aspects of the character, was completely discarded. Killing was just his thing now, and we expected to just accept it that way. And if it weren't for the plethora of the problems the DCU had, maybe this Batman could have evolved into the ideal version. Maybe when he got his movie, there have been some sort of course correction. Basically, I explained all of that in the video I made, so you can go check it out after this one. And hey, if you're enjoying this video so far or just want to help support the channel, a like and subscribe goes a very long way. And at the same time, you won't miss any other uploads, so what are you waiting for? Subscribe. So after the long years of grounded, realistic Batman by Nolan and the semi-fantastical Batman by Snyder, from Matt Reeves himself, we got the Batman. And if Nolan's Batman was grounded, Matt Reeves' Batman took it a step further. Not only was he more broody than any other Batman we have seen on screen, both as Batman and Bruce Wayne, he had a hyper-realistic suit made of familiar materials like leather, minimal gadgets, and a Batmobile that looked more like a refurbished muscle car than an actual Batmobile. The story itself was good, although we didn't need 3 hours just for a crime drama, but still, the movie was good. The movie sees Batman solving riddles left and right, with the villain being Riddler, who didn't even really look like the Riddler, but more like a real-world serial killer. And again, we also had Falcone in it, which, it's overdone, but it's a year one Batman, so it's a little bit acceptable. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to the fact that we had another realistic Batman. Now, with all that being said, do I hate the idea of a grounded Batman? Absolutely not. I like the Batman. I adore the Nolan trilogy and I enjoyed the Snyder vs. Batman, however short-lived it was. But there's something I didn't feel, something that I feel like when it comes to the animations, the comics, even the games, they make me feel that. And many other superheroes, whether it's their movies or their animations, make me feel that. And that's a connection to the character. And it's not the actor's fault, it's not the suit, it's not the fighting style, although questionable, or the gadgets. It's how Batman is perceived by directors. For over 20 years, there's been this quiet disdain towards Batman as a character. His silliness is all they seem to see, so they try to desperately strip it away through realism. And to be fair, Batman does have a lot of interesting stories to tell, some that if they are told when it comes to live action, they will be a masterpiece. But in doing so, it requires accepting Batman and its absurdity. And that seems to be the problem for most directors these days. So instead they change him, they ground him, they pull him closer to reality, ignoring everything that makes Batman special, just so they don't have to deal with the idea of superheroes at all. And that's really where the problem lives. Because when you strip Batman down this hard, when you sandblast every strange, exaggerated comic book edge of him, you don't actually make him more believable, you make him smaller. You shrink the idea of Batman. You turn a character that was never meant to function like a regular crime fighter into just another guy with gadgets and specifically trauma. And here's the irony no one likes to admit. Batman only makes sense because of that absurdity. A man dressing like a bat to scare criminals is ridiculous, and that's the point. Gotham is ridiculous, his villains are ridiculous, the city operates on nightmare logic, not realism. Batman is a response to a world that's already broken beyond normal rules. So when filmmakers try to force him into realism, they aren't fixing the problem, they are fighting the very thing that makes Batman work. It limits the kinds of stories you can tell. As I said earlier, Batman has a plethora of stories that haven't even tried to be tackled yet. In the last 20 years, Batman goes up and down and never stabilizes. It's either starting up in year 1 fighting Falcone, or way into his Batman years dealing with extraterrestrials when the character stories have so much to offer. Even Robin, who is such an integral part of Batman's character, hasn't been touched by live action since Batman and Robin. In the same vein, it limits the villains you can use. I can't begin to count the number of times you've had to see Batman try to stop Falcone, and maybe it's just a rumor, but we may be getting Two-Face again in Batman 2, played by Sebastian Stan, which would be the 3rd time we have seen him in live action. And not once have we seen Man-Bat. Because of this grounded mindset, Batman never seems to push far into his rogues gallery. Instead, it's just rehash of what's already been done. Why does every villain always want to take over the city with bombs? It's always the grounded ones, when there's just so many other villains that could craft out a much more interesting story, like Mr. Freeze, a better one, Poison Ivy, Solomon Grundy, Killer Croc, all those immaculate villains skipped just to tell the grounded story. And most importantly, it limits the idea of Batman as a symbol. Because Batman isn't just Bruce Wayne punching criminals, Batman is fear. He's a ghost story criminals tell each other. He's supposed to feel inhuman even though he's not. That's the balance, that's the magic trick about Batman. But in grounded text, Batman has to explain himself constantly. His tech has to be justified, his suit has to be plausible, his villains has to be reimagined into serial killers, terrorists, or crime lords, and suddenly Gotham stops being like Gotham and starts feeling just like Chicago. And look, I get why this happened. After Batman and Robin embarrassed the character, Hollywood panicked. Nolan didn't just reboot Batman, he rescued him. He proved Batman could be taken seriously, and that success rewired everything. But studios, I think, learned the wrong lesson. The lesson wasn't Batman must always be realistic. The lesson was Batman deserves to be taken seriously. Those are not the same thing. We don't watch movies just to see how realistic our characters could be, but instead for escapism. If I can't genuinely have fun and at the same time be in awe at the spectacle of the superhero in front of me, then what's the point? Why do I have to believe Batman could exist in my backyard? Animation understood this concept, comics understood this, games understood this. Arkham Batman is absurd, exaggerated, borderline superhuman, and nobody questions it. It somehow finds a balance between the grounded and the fantastical sides of Batman as both the story and the character. The DC AMU Batman did the same, whether it's the animated series or the new 52. All of this works because their worlds allow it. But live action, on the other hand, keeps refusing to allow this world to exist. And yeah, you may be wondering why I'm rambling so much about the problems with the realistic Batman when there's a more fantastical Batman set to come from the newly rebooted James Gunn DCU, which is Batman Brave and the Bold. And yeah, that's true. There is a more fantastical Batman coming, but I don't think it's safe either. Why? Well, this is why I'm afraid that when it comes to realism, it's going to maybe affect Batman moving forward. And it's simple and can be explained in one thing, being Man of Steel. Yes, I know it sounds absurd, but let me explain. Realism, whether we like it or not, has become default to Batman in some way, to the point where if we get a more fantastical Batman, one with comic accurate villains, heightened physics, colorful insanity, a huge chunk of the audience might reject it. Not because it's bad, but because it doesn't feel like Batman anymore. At least that would be the argument, because trust me, there are people out there who prefer the grounded take on Batman and might barf at the sight of anything less than that. That's the corruption I'm talking about. And that's why I brought up Man of Steel. The same way Snyder's Superman split people on what Superman should be, to the point that James Gunn's Superman still gets hated to this day, despite being a closer adaptation of the character even though it wasn't perfect. In the same way, grounded Batman has quietly rewritten the public's idea of Batman entirely. Now he has to be gritty, he has to be miserable, he has to feel real. Anything else feels wrong, even if it's closer to the source. And that's dangerous for a character that thrives on imagination. A character that at its core was made for kids. Batman shouldn't feel like it could exist in a world. A world should feel too small for Batman. That doesn't mean goofy, that doesn't mean camp, that doesn't mean ice puns and bat nipples. It means embracing heightened reality. Let Gotham be a nightmare city. Let villains be theoretical monsters. Let Batman be something criminals don't fully understand. A man, yes, but a man who feels like more. The idea that a broken child could turn fear into a weapon, that discipline could rival a lot of superheroes. And that's why he's so iconic. And the more we try to make Batman make sense, the more we lose the thing that made him timeless. That's why to me, realism doesn't just hurt Batman movies. It threatens the future of Batman. But hey, opinions are opinions, you have yours and I definitely have mine. But throughout this video, you've heard mine and I would like to know yours in the comment section. What do you think of the realistic takes on Batman? What do you think of a world where we shift to having a more fantastical Batman? The comments is yours, tell me what you think. And also if you like this video in any way, please feel free to drop a like, subscribe, it really helps this channel grow. This video took me very long to script and even longer to edit, but still, thank you for watching the video. I'm going to bed.